It's January, and for those of you living in the Northern Hemisphere, that means slap bang in the middle of winter. January really is the time where gardeners become very optimistic and also very bored. And the result of those two is perfectly good seed going to waste. Just because you can sow in January doesn't mean you should. I used to sow everything that I possibly could in January to try and get a head start. And the result of that was I was apologizing to the plants for the next 3 months. So today I want to talk you through 10 plants, both vegetables and flowers, that I strongly recommend not to be sowing in January, from my experience. If any of you have sown these seeds, or some of them, and you have had good results, please do let me know in the comments. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my list. And I look forward to seeing what you have to say in this regard. And if you like this content, please also subscribe to my page. Tomatoes are a family favorite to grow in the garden, and rightly so. However, the temptation is all too strong to start them in January, and from experience, I would recommend to wait a little bit longer. Tomatoes grow very quickly and they require lots of heat and light to do well. If they don't have these conditions, which often don't appear until much later in the spring, they grow very fast and they become leggy. And the danger of that is you have plants that are too weak before transplanting out. So although they do require a longer growing season because they need to form fruit, and then those fruit need to ripen before the autumn cold comes in, starting them too soon just means you're on the back foot in terms of strength and quality of the plants. So by waiting a few weeks, you're probably doing yourself a favor, because you don't need to look after these plants that grow so strongly before being able to transplant them out into the garden when it is much warmer. Next one I would recommend not sowing in January are chilies or peppers. These plants require consistent heat and light in order to germinate and grow well. They also germinate quite slowly, so if conditions are not optimal, if conditions are slightly cooler than they should be, they really do just sit there, they don't germinate, and the seeds then run the risk of rotting and dying as a result. The seedlings, however, once they have germinated, also stall in cold, gloomy weather. And so therefore, from experience, I would say wait a few weeks before sowing them. However, don't wait too long, because they do grow slowly and they do need a little bit more time to establish before being able to be transplanted out. But sowing in January, I would say, is too early. The light levels are too low. It isn't warm enough unless you're able to supply them with some basil heat in the form of heat mats. And even then, they do need consistent heat and light for a long time before being able to grow quite well. The next one on the list would be zucchinis or courgettes. Now, these plants absolutely explode into growth once they get going. And so I would really recommend waiting quite a while before sowing them, because very soon they will outgrow their pots, which means you need to maintain them. You need to keep on top of planting, providing feed, providing water, and also these plants are lovers of heat and light. They run the risk of also suffering from transplant shock eventually when they are able to go out into the garden, if they have been kept in their pots for too long. So in my opinion, it's just not worth it. Just wait until the weather is much warmer, get them going. They will grow away very quickly, and you won't have to keep on top of it as much as you would have had you sown them earlier in the year. Next one I would not sow in January are cucumbers. Cucumbers are very, very sensitive and hate having cold roots. They often become quite leggy and floppy in low light conditions. So at this time of the year, if you are growing seeds naturally on a windowsill, the light levels are just too low to provide you with strong, robust, and compact plants. And the other danger that cucumbers run into is the fact that they often struggle a lot from that initial stress. So they might fail completely if they've had any form of shock or stress in the beginning. So hold back on cucumbers. I would say wait at least for March, even April, before getting them in and providing them with the best possible conditions to give you a crop and a harvest later in the season. Now we're on to sweet corn. I love sweet corn, but I certainly would not sow it in January. They are very vigorous plants requiring quite a lot of heat and space in order to grow well. They often become root bound because they are such sturdy and strong plants. And the risk with that, or not risk, but annoyance with that, is that you're going to have to stay on top of transplanting, providing it with enough nutrients and enough space to grow well. Lastly, they suffer quite badly if they are transplanted too early. So hold back on sowing sweet corn. As they do grow fast, it really is worth waiting way into spring, even early summer, before getting them in the ground. Sweet corn, do not sow. Moving on to flowers, and cosmos being an absolute stellar plant in the garden. Really, really wonderful flowers, but the biggest mistake is planting them or sowing them too soon. I've done it more times than I care to remember, and from experience, I would really, really recommend waiting. Cosmos seed germinate very quickly. I've seen some seed germinate within 2 days, and the problem with that at this time of the year is that they become leggy. Now, they need a lot of light and air movement conditions, which are sometimes difficult to provide at this time of the year. And from experience, I found that leggy plants never seem to recover fully. So, because they do just grow so quickly and so easily from seed, just wait until conditions are slightly better. Wait for there to be more light, and even closer to the last frost-free date means you can get them out into the garden much sooner. Wait a bit for Cosmos. Not too dissimilar from Cosmos seeds are Zinnias. Now, Zinnias are very fast-growing, robust annuals, lovely to have in the garden. However, they do require quite a lot of heat, consistent heat and light to germinate. From experience, I found that they do grow very fast, and what tends to happen if you sow them too early indoors, the plants have very thin, weak stems, and this often results in zinnias just failing completely. I've also noticed about zinnias recently, they don't love to be transplanted. So it is just that much better waiting until it is warm enough, light enough to direct sow them, and they will just grow happily in the garden wherever you've sown them. One tip I can give you about zinnias is slugs and snails absolutely love the plants. So do just check wherever you've sown them. When they start emerging, keep them slug and snail free as much as possible. But do not sow them in January. It's too early and the plants will just be too weak. Next, I have to talk about the summer favorite, which is this herb, basil. Now, basil is really extremely sensitive to cold. You may have noticed this if you've ever bought basil leaves from a grocery store or a supermarket and placed the packet in the fridge. They come out brown, black, and disheveled. And that's because of where they come from. The Mediterranean regions, they want to grow in as much heat and as much light as possible. The plants tend to sulk in low light conditions, so it is worth waiting until light levels improve considerably. And from experience, if they are sown too soon, they tend to collapse indoors, which results in poor plants, plants that are not strong enough to go outdoors. And unfortunately, you would have wasted seed and some of your time, and potentially become a little bit despondent about why they don't grow. They love heat and they love light, and that would be my tip for why they should not be sown in January. Sunflowers are also a favorite plant and flower in the summer garden. The problem with sowing them in January or too early is that they have a strong taproot which hates confinement. So if they are sown too early, even if conditions are optimal, it means the taproot grows down and you end up having plants that struggle to grow fully unless you're able to keep up with their growth. And taproots tend to not transplant very well, so it's almost just not worth sowing too early and then running the risk of having a plant that suffers from transplant shock when you are able to transplant. Um, Sunflowers also become top heavy indoors, and this also causes problems with plant quality and keeping up with its growth, and just gives you weaker plants overall. And so my tip would be to wait much later in the spring when frost has passed, when conditions have warmed up, and just direct sow them and leave them be. They're able to get going on their own and they don't need too much of a fuss. French and runner beans are another summer garden favorite. Their large seeds often tempt people to sow them early because they do just grow so well. Now, the risk with doing that in January especially is that they germinate quite quickly, but they are not quick to thrive. Cold swirls result in seed rotting very easily, and even if the seeds do germinate and emerge, the risk of having cold swirls this time of the year is that the plants tend to stall. From my experience, beans of all sorts are just so much happier if they're direct sown when conditions improve, and this gives you the best chance to have the healthiest of plants to give you all those lovely, lovely pods later in the year. There you have it, a list of 10 vegetables, flowers, and herb seeds, which I personally would recommend not to sow in January for the various reasons that I've listed. Please let me know in the comments if you agree or if you disagree. Perhaps you've sown some of these or others this time of the year and you've had amazing success. gardening is very much a personal journey and a personal experience for everyone. So sometimes, seeds like this might work for you. This is just my personal opinion, and I would love to hear from you to see if you've experienced the same or perhaps very differently. Please subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to seeing you in the next videos. Bye for now.